Satan was the first deconstructionist who showed up with a question.
Right.
Oh my God.
Right.
And Satan does the same thing to Jesus. Did God really say? And so those who just say, we're just asking a question, actually what you're doing is spiritual warfare and demonic, because the wrong question leads a person to error
Right.
and to apostasy. There are some things that are thus saith the Lord, they're convictions and conclusions, and they're settled.
Yep.
And if you're reopening them, it's because what you're trying to do is you're trying to actually deconstruct and ultimately destroy Christianity.
Deconstructing the Woke Church is the title of this video that Nathan Finocchio and Mark Driscoll did on Mark Driscoll's YouTube channel, where they talk about a number of different topics, and there's some opinions that they give, and I just wanted to watch this video and give some thoughts on the opinions that they give and some of the conclusions that they make based on things that they say. So the video itself is like 35 minutes long. I'm just gonna cut the parts that I find interesting, that I think interesting opinions on, and we'll go from there. The thing about this video that I want you to understand is that my thoughts and responses are not directed at either of the two people giving them, and I'm gonna do my best to not share opinions on these specific people, because I don't think that that is necessary or needed when we're doing critical thinking. We are talking through thoughts that are given, not characters of people. So let's get into it. Let's check it out.
To me, it feels like whatever evangelicalism was or is quickly trending toward the progressive left.
Yeah.
And I think politics definitely exacerbates that. There's political.
So my first thought is, I think it's interesting that there's this idea that the understanding of evangelicalism and the understanding of society from that viewpoint is sometimes, it seems like that is assumed to have what all Christian thought always was. Okay, so when Mark Driscoll mentions that the pendulum has swung to the left of what evangelicalism was. What's interesting to me is it's as if there has never been any shifting or changing in thinking in Christianity. And I think that to assume that evangelicalism in the way that it was understood for maybe through the 1900s was how Christianity was always understood or viewed, I think is a little short-sighted. So I think that's a first thought that I have as we kind of get into this.
I'm going to give you a concept, and then you tell me if you think it's accurate. I was thinking about it we've got a dimmer switch at my house, and you can turn it off, it's all dark. You can turn it on, it's all bright. And then there's a series of sort of settings in the middle. And my belief today is that there are certain churches that are fully woke, meaning it's totally dark.
Right.
The gospel is not shining whatsoever. They've just completely turned the light down. These would be your BLM, rainbow flag, alphabet soup people.
Yeah.
They're ashamed of the gospel. They actually.
So as it begins, there's kind of this labeling or assuming and grouping. And that's how you make, that's how you form camps, right? That's how you form tribes in a way, that there is an assumption here that if you view one topic on a spectrum, or view one topic such as Black Lives Matter and things like that, he is specifically targeting what is a little bit political in some ways, at least politically within our society in America. And then he calls, LGBTQ, he calls them alphabet people, which is, I don't see how that's loving or Christ-like at all in any way. But I think there's this assumption that because people think differently on that, those topics, that automatically assumes that they're ashamed of the gospel, which is a weird conclusion to make for me personally. I don't quite get that. Especially, gender and homosexuality is obviously a hot topic, but even that topic, to assume that because somebody is gay affirming that they are ashamed of Jesus and the gospel seems short-sighted. I don't think I understand that conclusion, but that is my opinion.
Really looking at minorities and the polarities, and most evangelical leaders, pastors, they're somewhere in that. I would call this woke. Non-woke, I would call this soft woke.
I guess I just don't understand like what the obsession with this like woke thing is. Like because people are thinking about things differently or just kind of like processing things like that makes you woke or that makes you just this like flaming liberal or whatever. I just I don't quite understand how we're getting to that conclusion from these assumptions.
What is that age-old maxim? If you're young and you're not a liberal, you don't have a heart. If you're old and you're not and you're a liberal, you don't have a brain.
Yeah.
So there is a little bit of that too, where young people are going to they're not going to lead with their head, they're going to lead with their heart.
There's this assumption that they have this understanding as to why people are, I guess, liberal or whatever, or not evangelical. And he mentions that like the voting polls and things like that, that younger people are voting more left. And I'm sure they would say that's because of the decay of American family, Judeo-Christian values and all that. But I think what I find interesting is I think that there is such a lack of self-reflection of like what is it about the structure that I have existed in evangelical Christianity that is such a turnoff to these people, and what is like, and I think a lot of it is like not necessarily a denial of orthodoxy. It is a denial of wanting to participate in a structure that people look and view as damaging because of the damage that it has caused. And there's never been, not never, but there hasn't been a lot of like self-reflection or self-accountability on the structure. So these assumptions are being made in this video, but there's not like this self-reflection of the question of like, have we thought about why that people are this way?
But yeah, there's definitely been you're right. There's been a real shift, and I think it has to do with the Bible being at the absolute last priority.
So again, okay, so for people that have shifted their views on the Bible, so growing up for myself, it was this idea of like inerrancy, without error, inspired, and I hold to some of that, but I have different views on it now than I did growing up, and I think that would probably, maybe the way I view the Bible would probably be considered liberal, or progressive, whatever. But the question that I would ask them is, well, why do you think that? Why do you think that people maybe have a different viewpoint on the Bible now?
My son Zach and I were having lunch this week, and he was explaining it. He's the youth pastor at Trinity. He's youth director. He says there's a lot of width, there's not a lot of depth.
Yeah.
And what's happening because of social media, a lot of theological width. So you've got people with massive reach, but the depth is very, very shallow.
I would disagree. There are some creators out there that are wicked smart, like stupid smart. Like the Bible Project itself. Tim Mackey is brilliant, and he probably has differing viewpoints on certain theological standpoints, and these two guys do. Another guy that I've interviewed, Dan McClellan, is a biblical scholar who his videos, I've seen some of his TikToks that are like almost 10 minutes long where he's talking through the biblical scholarship on a certain subject, and he's refuting stances that maybe some of these guys they would actually agree with. So it's really interesting. I think again, I don't know if that's completely accurate. There's definitely creators that don't know what they're talking about, and I probably don't either at times. But I think that there are definitely people out there that when people come across their content, it really challenges their viewpoint on their theology and the Bible and God, because these people are not idiots. They're intelligent people who have critically thought about what it is that they're challenging and discussing.
I was a part of a church that we won so many people in terms of a hand goes up and people respond to a presentation, but like I guess I'm at the place in my life where I'm thinking, did they respond to like the whole thing? Like, do you know what you signed up for?
Yeah, so I would kind of agree with that from a different angle. People deconstruct because the church that they've been in gives them a very simplified version of Christianity, or the church that they've been in doesn't like tell them the whole picture, or tell them, and some pastors themselves, honestly, it seems like they don't know what's going on from different like angles and viewpoints on the Bible. And the Bible, I think, is the big thing that causes a lot of people to deconstruct. And so being literate with how to read the Bible and how to understand the Bible is very necessary. And so, people go to churches and every Bible verse is like your, life verse or practical verse, when the question that isn't asked a lot is like, well, what did they mean when they wrote it? And so I would kind of agree in some ways on this stance of, there's a reason why people deconstruct, and a lot of it does have to do with there's a shock value that comes when you find out about things about the Bible and about how just different things about the Bible that you didn't know, and you don't know what to do with that information. So I would definitely kind of agree in some ways to this stance.
What are some of the markers that you or your church or your ministry or the crew that you're rolling with are somewhere in that soft woke? Because with the hard woke, they virtue signal it.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to be opposing the Supreme Court overturning of abortion.
Right.
They're going to be, virtue signaling with Black Lives Matter, which, good Lord, as an organization, gosh, it's insanity.
Yeah.
And I always say if somebody's flying a BLM flag or a rainbow flag, they've officially come out of Satan's closet.
I got no comment, to be honest. If I just don't understand what is constructive out of that.
Like if you're going to go to hell, as a dude wearing, Cinderella slippers and changing your pronoun, at least you're going out, with some integrity because you're being honest.
Right.
It's the soft woke, the cowards, the compromisers in the middle that are harder to sniff out.
It's just like such a, I don't know, it's like this vitriol language of like war. Like we're going to war with these people and we got to sniff them out. We got to detect them. And I know the response will be, well, we're called to call out sin, or we're called to recognize the sheep's in wolf's clothing and all that. But I think that there's a right and wrong way to approach things. And I think that in some ways that attitude, in my opinion, I don't think it's helpful.
Augustine said in the essentials unity, in the non-essentials liberty, in all things love. I like that. Okay. He identifies that there are things that are essential in our faith, and there are some things that are non-essential in our
Call
faith.
it closed and open hand.
Totally, yeah. And so I think a good pastor, somebody who cares about the Bible and Jesus and has studied a little bit, will tell his congregation, these are things that are closed-handed, these are things that are open-handed, and will define those things that are closed-handed.
So what would you say closed hand?
I would say closed-handed would be the Apostles' Creed, would be a great place to start. But before that, I'd say the primacy of Scripture, the infallibility of Scripture.
The Bible is uniquely authoritative.
2 Timothy 3:16. That's a great place to start. All Scripture is God-breathed, all of it, right?
I think that verse is taken out of context so much.
I think you can't get rid of hell. You can't do that. It's literally like it's in the creeds. You know what I mean? Like you can't do that.
Well, and it's. I mean, Jesus talks about it a lot. Of course, it's in the Old Testament. It's all over. If there's no consequence in the end, then every day should just be Charlie Sheen Day.
Yeah.
So this is not an opinion on hell or heaven, but I think that there are people that have different viewpoints rather than, the result of, hell being eternal conscious torment. I think they would disagree with this because you can stem your living out the kingdom of God and treating people like they're in the image of God without necessarily having a viewpoint of the hell being eternal conscious torment. So I think that there are people out there that don't necessarily have that viewpoint necessarily of like eternal conscious torment, but they still feel like that following Jesus and following Christ and living out his teachings and believing in him as salvation to having a relationship with God and viewing people as the image of God and children of God and living that out. I think that you can still do that.
Here's kind of my thesis. We used to have these different, I say there's national borders and there's state borders.
Yeah.
And in the state borders, you're still part of the same country. Once you cross a national border, you're a different nationality.
Yeah.
And some of these issues, I would say gender is a national boundary. Male, female, marriage is a national boundary.
Yeah.
Once you cross those, you've left Christianity, you're into apostasy. The people who believe the Bible come to one conclusion. The people who really don't believe the Bible come to another conclusion. And all of a sudden, I think issues like that, they just reorganized all the teams that used to fight.
Right.
For me, I struggle with a particular attitude that's kind of in this video in some ways. And, I can appreciate somebody being confident in what they believe and things like that. But I think it's just like to just think that because someone has a stance that they just don't care about the Bible. They don't care about Christianity. They don't care about any of it. It's kind of just this, to me, a false concept, and it's not true, because there's many people that I disagree with on certain topics theologically that I know have genuinely thought about it, have genuinely like wrestled with it and struggled with it, and it wasn't just them saying, well, you know what, culture is accepting it, so I am. It was a genuine, like, they were trying to find understanding, and they're, you know, the research that they've done, or the seeking answers that they've done, have led them to a different conclusion on some things. And I think that I think in some ways the question that I would ask is, where do we make room for that in the church? To what extent? And I guess for some people, there's a different answer on that.
My dad hung drywall. Like, there's boys and girls,
Right.
you know, and if you don't know that, like, I don't understand you.
It's because you're not trying to understand them. And I'm not even saying that, you know, like, they're right or wrong, but there's got to be a way to go about things in a different manner than just a I am right, you're wrong attitude, and get over it.
Satan was the first deconstructionist who showed up with a question.
Right.
Oh my God.
Right.
And Satan does the same thing to Jesus. Did God really say? And so those who just say, we're just asking a question, actually what you're doing is spiritual warfare and demonic, because the wrong question leads a person to error,
Right.
and to apostasy. There are some things that are thus saith the Lord, they're
Yep.
convictions and conclusions,
Yep.
and they're settled.
Yep.
And if you're reopening them, it's because what you're trying to do is you're trying to actually deconstruct and ultimately destroy Christianity.
So, this video, I think, you know, a lot of it, if you want to go watch it, and I would encourage you to watch it, because I'm not saying that you should disagree with these guys. I'm not saying you should agree with them. What I'm saying is you should critically think. And I think there's a correct way and attitude in our thinking. And this is not a personal attack on either of these two. This is me just, I think, in a hopefully healthy way, disagreeing with the way in which they approach how they have these conversations in a public manner. And you know, I don't know, I'm not familiar with like the other work that they do. So maybe they have had conversations with people that have really thought about these topics and opposing viewpoints. I think it's really helpful for Christians and followers of Jesus to truly like wrestle with conversations of people that you disagree with. And I think that's really, really vital. But I think that some of this video isn't helpful. Some of it I'm not particularly interested in, because I don't really care about the weeds of different theology of like tongues and things like that. But there's some of that in this video that I didn't include. But I think it's a really interesting video. I think it does show an attitude that some people have that I don't personally have. The thing that they bring up in the beginning about like young people leaving or young people walking away, a lot of it has to do with this attitude that people have or have had, and they don't want anything to do with it. And so when they find people that they label as progressive and they seem kind and they seem loving, well, that draws them into it and they're interested in that. And so I think that for myself, and what I hope to do on this YouTube channel and in our podcast and any resources that we put out, is that we have an open mind and a conversation from a place of like humility and servanthood and looking like Jesus in the way we think about our theology and the way we think about Christianity and what it means to follow Jesus. So if this video was helpful for you, hit the subscribe button, like it, leave a comment what you think. Do not roast me in the comments. I am not even attacking or coming after these two. This is just a reaction video, and these are my opinions, and my opinions could be wrong. So thank you for tuning in. I appreciate it. Until next time, I'm Blake.